Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, welcome one and all to this latest instalment in our Sydney Mining Club Luncheon Series. My name is Steve Galilee and I will be your MC for today. And once again, it's tremendous to see a capacity crowd. This is the fourth luncheon series in a row now where we've had a full house and a waiting list for tickets. So it's fantastic to see the ongoing popularity of these events. It's a real demonstration of the strength of the Sydney Mining Club now and into the future. So thank you for your attendance and for your support. These events would not be possible without you. They would also not be possible without the generous support of our wonderful sponsors. You can see their banners up here today. And I'd like to acknowledge in particular our gold sponsors, GBA Capital, Bear Dolbear and AME Mineral Economics, and also all of our other very kind sponsors, CRE Insurance, CRU Group, Fender Geographics, Kingsgate Consolidated, Ioneer, Research as a Service, RFC Ambrian, Taurus Funds Management, TEAS, Veritas Securities, APM Graphics, the New South Wales Minerals Council and AMEC. The support of all of our sponsors makes what we do here possible, so please support them with your business. And how about a round of applause for our sponsors, please? We've got two special guests presenting today focusing on copper. We'll be hearing from CEO and Managing Director of Sandfire Resources, Brendan Harris, and Executive Chairman of Cobre Limited, Martin Holland, about their respective copper projects in Botswana, Spain and here in Australia. We all know the copper story. It's one of those gifts of the earth, mined for centuries, used in many ways throughout history and still of such great importance to our modern society. It's an enduring commodity of great value, which we continue to find new ways to utilise, to meet new needs and use in new applications to assist our ongoing progress in so many different fields. We have it in abundance here in Australia, including here in New South Wales, where copper and copper concentrates are this state's third most valuable export commodity after coal and gold. But Australia is not alone in this endowment, and while we have an estimated 10% of world copper reserves, the third highest, our national copper production sits 8th on the global ladder at around 4%. However, with a global copper shortage looming, the opportunity for copper to shine is here before us. In my role as Chief Executive of the New South Wales Minerals Council, this is one of the key messages I communicate to the New South Wales Government in our discussions about the long-term future of mining in this state. And with the New South Wales Government currently working on an updated critical minerals strategy, which will set a strategic direction for the development of our metals and minerals sector into the future, I'm optimistic about the opportunities for copper and many of the other commodities that we have here. But we need to see more than just a sharp-looking glossy booklet full of platitudes to make things happen. While exploration spending is strong across a range of commodities, we also need the right policy settings to attract the investment needed to turn discoveries into projects. We also need better support from our national government in Canberra. How often do we hear politicians talking up the importance of critical minerals and metals, particularly in relation to renewable energy? It's like their safe space where they feel they can talk about mining without having to discuss what they regard as controversial topics like coal and gas. Yet despite these nice words about metals and minerals, we are still seeing ridiculously lengthy approvals processes in relation to approvals out of the Commonwealth Government. Here in New South Wales, for example, 2 new metals mines were approved in April last year, but they still wait a year later for the green light from Canberra in relation to related national approvals processes. It is simply unacceptable to our industry that the New South Wales Government does its job, assesses these projects rigorously, determines that they are ready for approval, and then we have to sit back and wait while the bureaucrats and lawyers in Canberra dither back and forth. It's a key issue for our sector. It's one we have taken up with vigour with the state and federal governments, and I hope we'll see some progress soon. Because there is enormous potential here. We all know it in this room. The potential for here and elsewhere around the world for new projects, for the many new projects that are going to be needed to meet what is expected to be incredibly significant future demand across so many different commodities. And this is no more so than for copper. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing from our speakers today. We will hear from Brendan first, followed by Martin, and both will then come up on stage into the relatively comfy chairs for a question and answer session. So please enjoy your lunch, enjoy the presentations, and get your questions ready. Thank you. Hello again. I hope you're enjoying your meal. We have two speakers to get through today, so we're going to start. It's with great pleasure that I now introduce our first speaker, Mr. Brendan Harris, CEO and Managing Director of Sandfire Resources. Brendan is a highly experienced mining executive with a broad range of leadership, commercial and technical skills, particularly in the management and operations of a diversified international mining business. Before joining Sandfire Resources, Brendan was a member of South32's senior leadership team since its demerger from BHP in 2015, playing a key role in the company's establishment as its inaugural Chief Financial Officer. Most recently, Brendan held the role of Chief Human Resources and Commercial Officer at South32, with responsibility for global commodity marketing, procurement and human resources. He has also previously served as BHP's Global Head of Investor Relations, and prior to joining BHP in 2010, held various roles in investment banking, including as Executive Director at Macquarie Securities, where he led the metals and mining research team. Brendan holds a Bachelor of Science in Geology and Geophysics from Flinders University. Will you please join me in welcoming Brendan to the stage? Thank you.
Before I kick off, I should say it's not a bad photo, is it? It's not often you get to see a mine that's literally only having its anniversary. So hello and good afternoon. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we stand, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, as well as the First Nations peoples of the lands on which Sandfire conducts its business. We pay our respects to their elders and leaders, past, present and emerging. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Brendan Harris. I'm the CEO of Sandfire, a growing global copper producer and explorer. I feel very much at home here in Sydney, having spent the better part of a decade in this wonderful town through the 2000s, predominantly with Macquarie. There's a lot of friends in the audience, in fact, and it was an incredible time to be a mining-focused finance professional as China went through its generational urbanisation-charged growth phase that had such a lasting impact on our industry. Some good, some bad. And here we are today at another critical juncture in our industry as we scramble to supply the critical minerals the world desperately needs. Of course, to electrify and decarbonise the global economy. And there is no more important metal than copper as the most viable, efficient conductor of electricity that we have. So let me tell you a little bit more about Sandfire and the plans we have to become a sustainable global mining company and copper producer of significance. But first, of course, can I ask that you take note of the usual disclaimers in relation to today's presentation. Having joined the company just over 12 months ago, one of the first things we set out to do was to co-create our new purpose. We mine copper sustainably to energise the future. We are particularly and unashamedly proud to be part of the mining industry, part of our local communities, striving to make real change for the better. We must work safely every day, look after each other, the surrounding environment and of course heritage. To be a successful company and a sustainable mining company, we just have to do the basics well. That's how we'll protect, generate return and recycle capital over the long term, grow total shareholder returns and create lasting value for those host communities and, of course, those host governments. It's also why we have intentionally developed a simple strategy designed to sharpen our focus around 5 strategic pillars. Empower our people and define clear lines of accountability, something I'm very passionate about. Deliver safe, consistent and predictable performance, again doing the basics well. And reducing our carbon intensity as we increase our reserves and, importantly, demonstrate capital discipline. And you'll notice that rather than being a strategic pillar, we believe that our ESG framework must permeate and be integrated in everything we do, with safety at its core. Nothing, of course, is more important than the health and well-being of our people. While our TRIF of 1.9 remains at the low end of industry norms, we can't be complacent. A recent increase in high potential incidents in our business provided a timely reminder of the work we have to do. More broadly, we believe a transparent and inclusive culture that values diversity will deliver the challenging targets that we've set ourselves. And I'm pleased to say that my leadership team now has as many talented women as men, while our board has also achieved its 40-40-20 target. And John, I'd just recognise our chairman who's in the audience. Alongside the vital role we play as a copper producer, we've also made a series of firm commitments to decarbonise our own business, and we're making strong progress there. Just as we are in our efforts to establish what we call the Sandfire way of working, which is a foundational body of work that will establish the policies, standards and procedures we need to manage and govern a growing global business. It's this way of working that will see us being valued by our host communities, securing and expanding our licence to operate. So let's turn to Matsa. This short video we'll play in a moment will give you a better feel for our modern mining hub rooted in the Andalusia region of the Iberian Peninsula. For those of you who have visited this region, you will know how beautiful it is, with its prolific Australian gum trees and rolling hills. It's very easy to feel right at home.
Sandfire completed the acquisition of the Matsa operations located in the Huelva province of southwestern Spain in February 2022. The Matsa operations include a world-class polymetallic operation with 3 underground mines. We have the Aguas Unidas, Magdalena and Sotiel. The 3 mines combine to produce 4.7 million tonnes per annum of ore, which is treated in one facility here at Aguas Unidas to produce 3 mineral concentrates of copper, lead and zinc, which are then shipped through the port of Huelva. It is a large-scale, long-life base metals asset that allows Sandfire to leverage its strong mining, processing and exploration expertise. The broader Matsa portfolio offers exceptional exploration upside, and together with Sandfire's emerging operations in Botswana, is expected to become the backbone of the company's business for the next decade and beyond.
Thank you, Ben. What I hope is most apparent in that video is the well-capitalised state of our modern mining complex that undoubtedly provides a distinct competitive advantage for us in the region. I think Ben would remind me regularly that the first time he took analysts and investors to Spain, they remarked as they left the decline that they had expected donkeys and carts to come out of the mine. Now, this is a modern mining province with a steeped and esteemed history in our industry. You will have seen or had a feel for, if you like, in the video that we have 3 underground mines and a centralised processing hub with 4.7 million tonnes of annualised processing capacity, producing just over 90,000 tonnes of metal in copper equivalent terms. This is an excellent jurisdiction to do business. We have ready access to zero emissions electricity for 100% of our needs off the grid, and a very supportive government that places green hydrogen, green energy and critical minerals at the heart of its economic growth plans. Sound familiar? What's more, we shouldn't forget that the Spaniards have been extracting metal from these hills from before Roman times, meaning we have a highly capable workforce that lives in the surrounding villages, drive in, drive out. Consider our turnover increased by 50% last year, our workforce turnover, from 2 to 3%. A stark difference to the elevated turnover rates we see here in the Australian FIFO industry. I know we love to talk about industry-wide cost inflation, but I'd encourage you to ponder whether this is actually a pervasive issue for the industry, or rather a largely Australian or even developed economy challenge. To this end, we're one of the few companies I know of that has either maintained or reduced its cost guidance this year. More broadly, our Matsa team has fundamentally reset the way it thinks about its ore bodies, having developed a new geological, geotech and geomet model by relogging historical core in the 2 years since taking ownership. This was one of the major opportunities identified in due diligence, and it is a clear success story for our company that I'll expand upon shortly. In parallel, we have continued to invest heavily in underground development and ventilation, which is bearing fruit, growing consistency and predictability, culminating in a record 4.7 million tonne per annum run rate in the last quarter. And as many as you would know in the industry, as we build run-of-mine stock and greater resilience in our mine plans, we'll be even better placed to control the ore blend that we feed into our 3 concentrate lines as we strive for a sustainable increase in metal recovery. It's all but free money, as you know, for the taking. New zones of mineralisations will convert over time from our larger resource base. We have a minimum life at the moment in the order of around 8 to 10 years, and the real objective we have is to target around 15 years of reserves in front of the face within 3 to 5 years, and that's something I'll talk a lot more about over the coming 6 months. We're currently drill testing our highest priority target zone, which lies around 350 metres down plunge of the Massatu ore body at Magdalena, where prior EM surveys identified prospective conductors, and we're also testing the interpreted 1.8 kilometre strike potential of San Pedro. As an old exploration geologist, I know how important it is to remain disciplined in this area, and we will as we allow our annual budget in the coming 6, 12 and 24 months and beyond to tick higher, and that's really a function of the prospectivity we see on the ground and the potential to grow NPV per share in the most capital efficient way I know. So let's turn to Mateo. Again, I hope you enjoy this quick introduction to our newest mine, which I consider to be the jewel in our crown. Thanks, Ben.
Hi everyone, my name is Dale Burgess and I'm the Executive Head of Country for Sandfire Resources here in Botswana. Today I'm situated at Sandfire's newly opened Mateo copper mine, located in the Kalahari copper belt, approximately 70 kilometres from the township of Hunzi. So the Mateo operating hub forms the foundation of Sandfire's long-term plans to mine copper from this jurisdiction within the Kalahari copper belt. Currently, our operations are focusing on the T3 deposit with a rapid expansion to the A4 adjacent our mining operation. Our processing facility here behind me produces a high-grade copper concentrate that is trucked all the way to Walvis Bay in Namibia over approximately 1,000 kilometres. From there, it is shipped to smelters all around the world. The approval of this expansion allows us to schedule in FY25 over 50,000 tonnes of contained copper in our production stream. At Sandfire, we are committed to making long-lasting positive changes for the communities that we operate. Our community relations programs are built around 4 pillars of education, public health, female empowerment and youth development. Sandfire is committed to training, recruiting and developing our local workforce for the betterment of the future of this country. Currently, 97% of our workforce are local Botswana people. I'm a mining professional who's been in the industry for 34 years, both underground and open pit, and I had the opportunity to join Sandfire Resources 2 years ago and to be a part of this exciting operation here in Botswana. So it's incredibly important for the country of Botswana, this mining operation. Annually, through direct royalties and taxes, we'll be contributing over 700 million pula per annum to the economy, and obviously the ongoing direct and indirect jobs. Currently we have 1,500 directly employed people on site, and obviously for every direct job there are 3 or 4 downstream roles as well. So incredibly important for the country.
Thanks again, Ben. I know John always likes seeing the SAG mill turning. As you've just seen, our development of Mateo has established a high-quality, strategic mining and processing hub in the heart of the Kalahari Copper Belt. And with an energised and passionate local workforce, stable democracy and attractive fiscal terms, we're very fortunate to be an early mover in the basin. In fact, it may surprise you that Botswana was ranked number 10 in the Fraser Institute's Index of Mining Investment Attractiveness, outranking a number of Australian states. All of these elements and more helped our talented team develop and then rapidly expand Mateo to its current 5.2 million tonne per annum nameplate rate, on budget, a rarity in our industry today. Of course, hard work, dedication, experience and proven capability were critical elements in our formula for success, as was ready-made access to infrastructure and the billiard table flat landscape we call home. Fortuitously, the T3 resource, which is the mainstay of the operation, lies within kilometres of the main highway that connects the country from north to south, and a high voltage power line that follows its path. In order to secure our social licence for the longer term, we are working hard to protect the environment and build deep ties with the nearby Hansi community as we look to establish the local supply chain to ensure we do our part to support the government's drive for citizen economic empowerment. From recent announcements, many of you would know that we achieved commercial production at Mateo on the 1st of July 2023. From there, the chart on the right-hand side of this slide says it all. Aside from some challenges with our initial concentrate filter press, the ramp-up of Mateo has been nothing short of exceptional. But we're not resting on our laurels. We're currently focused on maintaining the plant's expanded 5.2 million tonne per annum throughput rate on a sustainable basis before testing the facility's ultimate potential. Looking ahead, the delivery of first ore from the A4 open pit is our next major milestone as it establishes the platform for the push toward metal production of 58,000 tonnes next year. Of course, there are two sides to the margin equation, and we've also been particularly pleased that our costs have been well contained in Botswana at $41 per tonne of ore processed. And it would be remiss of me not to mention that these outstanding achievements saw Mateo generate $54 million of underlying operating EBITDA at a margin of 43%, well before the prices rose recently, in its first 6 months of operation. As I said, this is the emerging jewel in our crown. And just like at Matsa, we see enormous prospectivity in our large land holding. Our exploration team recently completed another drilling program at A4 to test for dip and stripe extensions for known mineralisation, and we're waiting assays as we speak. They've also recommenced drilling at T3, testing for additional mineralisation in the footwall of the open pit, as we leverage our growing understanding of the structural controls of economic mineralisation. As many of you in the room would know, it's amazing when you actually open up an ore body and you can see the structure in the footwall, how much you learn and how quickly you learn. And then finally at A1, we recently confirmed a maiden 5.6 million tonne resource located 20 kilometres to the northeast of our processing facility. Suffice to say, we see real potential for this to grow as we increase drill hole density and test the open extent of the ore body. And that's the case almost everywhere we look because, as I like to say, when it comes to the Kalahari Copper Belt, we've only just scratched the surface. So on to the United States, where we recently welcomed the Montana Supreme Court's decision to reinstate the mine operating permit for the Black Butte Copper Project. Our current drilling program is designed to test the extent of the high-grade Johnny Lee lower copper zone as we seek to enhance the project's economics ahead of a final investment decision, which is anticipated somewhere in the next 18 to 24 months. So when we bring this together, we land at our guidance for FY24, which is unchanged from what we conveyed when we reported our March quarter results. As we said then, Mateo is tracking very well, while Matsa is running hard with a wet sail as it seeks to catch up lost ground. So we're far from perfect. We're always learning, but on the whole, we're going pretty well. The medium and long-term fundamentals for copper keep getting better, and we're well positioned to deliver 50% growth in copper equivalent production across the 2 years to the end of FY25 into what will likely be an increasingly tight market. Not many companies can say that. So thank you. I look forward to coming back and joining you for questions. Cheers.
Thank you very much, Brendan. And as Brendan indicated, we'll be having questions after our second speaker. You might get some questions on the tax rates in Botswana from the sounds of it. Certainly sounded interesting to me. Our next speaker is Mr. Martin Holland from Cobre Limited. But before I introduce Martin, we have a video to show. Okay, Mr. Martin Holland, a mining executive with over 15 years of corporate experience. Martin is also the founder and executive chairman of Cobre, a pure-play copper exploration and development growth company within the Kalahari Copper Belt in Botswana. Martin has listed 5 ASX-listed exploration companies and has been an executive director in multiple companies that have collectively raised over $200 million for exploration, focusing on new future metals discoveries. He is an executive director of Armada Metals and the founder and former CEO of Lithium Power International, which was recently taken over for around $400 million. Will you please join me in welcoming him to the stage?
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for the Sydney Mining Club for organising this event. It's much appreciated. I think what you just witnessed there in that video is Cobre's vision. So the vision itself is more about if there's no exploration, there's no new discoveries, and if there's no new discoveries, there's no pathway to net zero 2050. So I'll put a lot of emphasis into new greenfield, exploration discoveries. So today, Cobre, I'm going to talk about unlocking the Kalahari Copper Belt. Brendan Harris obviously touched on, like a whole range of advanced things that's happening over in Botswana at present. But we're going to focus on our tenements that we own here in the Kalahari Copper Belt. So there's a disclaimer. In regards to the corporate structure, I'll touch on this to start off with. There's currently around 330 million shares on issue in Cobre. We currently have a market capitalisation of just under 30 million Australian dollars, cash at bank at present of around 4 million Australian dollars, and our largest shareholder is a company by the name of Strata Investment Holdings. They were involved in the original discovery of T3, which is the Matheo mine, and that was actually discovered by a good old friend of mine, Terry Grammer, who passed away a couple of years ago. So I've got about a decade of knowledge of what's happening in the Kalahari Copper Belt in Botswana, and hence why I'm here exploring at present. So Cobre itself has a three-pronged approach. So the first approach here is to explore big, so to think big. And we're actually doing this at the moment in partnership under the BHP Explore program. So last year there was over 500 exploration companies globally that applied for the BHP Explore program, and they chose 5. And Cobre was one of the 5 winners of the 2024 cohort. And in that time, since January through to now, there's been an extensive amounts of work that's been happening with BHP. And I've gone through this whole program with them. And more recently, the due diligence has been completed over the last 6 months, which actually ended in a site visit last week by their team. And the second prong to our approach is more strategic drilling. So what we're doing here is looking for new discoveries along strike known deposits, which I'll touch on. And the third, which I actually consider as the most important, is our development project that we're working on at present, which is a method that we're using, which is quite unique, that I'll take you through, which is an ISCR method, which is an overall acronym for in situ copper recovery, which I'll take you through. So to start off with, Explore Big. So Explore Big here, Cobre itself is the second largest landholder of the Kalahari Copper Belt. So we own quite an extensive package of land that was also strategically picked up many years ago. We own the majority of the basin margins of this area, and as most people in this audience would know, that the most large deposits, like Tier 1 style deposits, are found on basin margins. So we believe we're strategically placed in the right position of the Kalahari Copper Belt. We are currently drilling at our Okavango project at the moment, which is a long strike MMG's recent acquisition of Chemical for circa $1.9 billion US. So we're doing some drilling there, which I'll take you through. But our Tier 1 sort of exploration is focused more on the Kit West project, which you can see there on the left. There's been a huge amount of work done there, and I'll take you through that now. So as I touched on earlier, there was the BHP Explore program that we've gone through. That's in the final stages. We had 2 people from the technical department of BHP on site last week, and they left very pleased with what they've seen. The amount of work that we've done on this area has been quite systematic over the last sort of 3 years, and we've probably got some of the most advanced exploration targets to go and drill there now on these basin margins. We're currently doing some seismic work on site at the moment, so passive and active seismic. And we've also got a very strong team from a technical point of view in country. So our CEO, Adam Woolridge, he was ex-BHP. He's a geoscientist. He was actually working in the Kalahari with BHP back in the 1990s. And we also have a team of other experts that you can see in this photo that is working pretty much full-time for Cobre at present under contractual basis. So the strategic drilling that we're doing at the moment, which I touched on earlier, we're currently doing about 7 diamond holes at present along strike MMG's recent acquisition. There hasn't been a lot of drilling done here at all over the years. So again, like new greenfield exploration that we've done here, there's been, again, like a huge amount of work gone into systematically understanding these targets. And now our team can pretty much drill the contact every single time satisfactorily without even missing a hole, which is a very cost-effective way of us learning about what's actually in the ground from a mineralisation perspective. We're currently about 6 holes through this program, and we've got another one to go, and we may be looking to update that program with further exploration in this area post receiving results from this program itself. It's worth noting we own about 100 kilometres worth of strike with similar anticlines and fold traps as that is Zone 5, Zone 6 and Zeta. So moving forward here on the third prong, this is our development project. It's called Ngami. We have completed around 17,000 metres of diamond and RC drilling on this project area. We've hit some reasonable grades throughout this area, so circa 9 to 10 metres at 3.5% copper. I think what's more interestingly though, this area is quite vast, so you're talking like a 40-kilometre strike that we've identified here of copper mineralisation. Just about every single hole that we drilled and stepped out has hit copper mineralisation with no real like low-grade background throughout the whole sort of 40 kilometres. So the lowest grade that we're getting is around 0.3, 0.4% along the whole way. So we actually looked at this more as like instead of these smaller high-grade pods, this is actually quite a large deposit in the making here. So we've already identified 103 million tonnes to 166 million tonnes of copper in this area. This was actually quite a conservative modelling that we've done, and our technical team has pretty much cut back all the high-grade intersections that we've received to actually come up with this exploration target. The view here is that with further drilling, because we drilled along the whole strike, we'll probably find more high-grade pods in this area, which will potentially increase the exploration target exponentially. I should note as well, which is the last point there, that we flew a 8,778 kilometre airborne gravity gradient survey in collaboration with Sandfire. And then those results have been interpreted by Cobre, and it's actually been a very useful collaboration to work on our targeting in the area of the Kalahari, considering there's between 50 and 70 metres of sand cover in the area. So I thank Brendan for that. Thirdly, here in regards to the development overall potential, there's a hydrogeological test that's currently was announced like 2 days ago that has confirmed the viability of extraction using in situ copper recovery. So what we've actually completed here is that we've worked through, and the company has understood that we've got a large exploration target in this area. So instead of moving ahead now with the resource drill out, we've decided to step back from further drilling there and understand the hydrogeological method of can we actually extract this copper from the ground before we go back to drilling. This is actually stacked up. So we've actually ticked every single box from a desktop perspective. So to actually have an in situ copper recovery, it's a very unique asset that's required, and you need to tick a lot of boxes to start off with. So the first box is that the deposit itself has to be pretty much 100% a chalcocite mineralisation, so it's leachable. The second point is that you need to have natural permeability and also porosity with the actual core itself from a fracturing perspective. And we've done test work on that to show that it is permeable and also fractured. And thirdly, the deposit itself has to sit below the water table, which is also very unique. So these sort of conditions for in situ copper recovery pretty much wipe out 90% of most copper projects out there globally. So from a desktop, it's stacked up, and then we moved ahead to actually do some in-ground work. So we put down a production well, and we started pumping for the first time. And then we actually stepped out and put down an injection well and started injecting and pumping at the same time. And the hydrogeologists that I also used when I was at Lithium Power International over in Chile in the Salars are also working here. And the results that we're getting, they're saying is perfect and viable for an ISCR method to be used on this project area. Moving forward, we have also completed some metallurgical work to see the recoveries are in excess of 70% at the moment. We're moving ahead now for some further column testing on the project at present. And in parallel with all that, we've hired Metz Engineering out of Perth to do a scoping study on the project itself. So we're expecting to have our OPEX and CAPEX and also net present value of the project over the next quarter. So I'm looking forward to seeing those results and then moving ahead to actually get a pilot plant up and running on this project and look to actually produce a copper cathode as the final product on site here in Botswana. So I'm not sure if many people know about in situ copper recovery, but in uranium, about 57% of all uranium mines globally use this method. So it's quite a common method when it comes to uranium, uncommon when it comes to copper. But you can see here, it's a very simple process. It's wells that go in along strike. It's actually quite modular, so you can keep stepping out along the way. And all you do is you pump in some acid that goes into an injection well, which is equivalent to a pH level 4, which is like lemon and water sort of equivalent. It's a very environmentally friendly way of mining. And then you've got the natural fractures that you pump up. It goes into a leach pond. It goes into a solvent extraction plant. And then it goes across to an electro-winning plant. And at that point, you're producing the copper cathode on site. There is one comp that's worth looking at. It's called Florence Copper. It's a project that's based in Arizona. Their grades are a lot lower than what we've actually got here on site in Botswana. They're actually in the stage now of producing a copper cathode using this method at present, and they're looking to go into full production in 2025. It's very similar, and they've got overall very similar attributes to this deposit itself. So that's probably one to look at as a comp perspective. So I've got a video now to show you in regards to what we're doing here in Botswana. I think it's worth noting as well, but it says there in regards to low OPEX and low CAPEX, like you're talking, if this does work, you're talking around $1.10 a pound OPEX, and for a project that could have, you know, quite a large MPV, you're looking at around a $200 million CAPEX, which is actually modular as well. So that's going to be interesting once the scoping study comes out in the next quarter. Here you can see as well that we've got strong country relationships. That's the president of Botswana, next to myself, and also Adam Woolridge, the CEO, in Perth last year. He made a clear message to me and said, if you can prove the process works, you get the full support of the government to move this ahead. The country itself is in a very strong sort of position, as what Brendan touched on earlier. You know, to turn a target from a resource all the way through to mining in 4 years is like record time, probably like 3 years faster than world average. And I think that's a huge testament to not only Sandfire but also the government of Botswana. Here you can also see that we had the Botswana Department of Mine visit our project in May of 2024. So all our licenses are in good standing and are all approved for further exploration on this project areas. We've also got a local workforce as well. So you can see that's myself in the middle with the nice white hard hat, and a few of our other team there as well. But we've got quite a good alliance here with local workforce. We've got an alignment with Mitchell's Drilling, who's also a large shareholder of Cobre. So we've got access to multiple drill rigs at any point in time. And we've also got access to local team and workforce in Botswana. This here is a photo of a lot of the local people that are working for us. They do a lot of the soil sampling for us as well. So it's quite amazing that there's like 14 Botswanians that are doing soil samples for us on a daily basis, you know, covering this, you know, extensive ground of the Kalahari Copper Belt. And it's great to have them on our team and also their support. So from a timetable perspective here, that we're currently completing our hydrogeological pump test and modelling, which I said is working at present. We're about to do our metallurgical column tests. So there's been some metallurgical work that's been completed that shows good recoveries, but we're moving ahead towards column testing now. And also the economic scoping study is underway. And then moving ahead after that, if that all stacks up, we'll start doing our resource drilling on that project. At Kitlani West, which is the T1 sort of exploration, we're about to start seismic survey on that and then look to target drill those targets in Q4. And then our Okavango project, which is a long strike MMG, we're currently drilling that at present. So in summary here, it's a vast land package in what I believe is one of the best copper belts, you know, underdeveloped copper belts in the world. I believe, as what Brendan said, that we've only just scratched the surface here in this area. So there's a huge amount of work that has to be done still to find and unlock, you know, further copper discoveries, you know, on this belt. The company is also going down a development path. We've currently got the support of BHP. I've talked about the in situ copper recovery project. It's a top African mining jurisdiction and also rates 10 in the world from a mining friendly jurisdiction point of view in regards to the Fraser Institute. And we've got experienced leadership and strong fundamentals on the overall copper sector. So thank you very much for everyone listening. Cheers. Great.
Brendan, would you like to come back up on the stage for questions? Thank you very much for that presentation, Martin. We've got time for some questions. We have our two guests up on the stage. And I'll direct traffic as we go. We've got some roving microphones. Who has the microphone? Linda up the back there. We have another question down the front. We'll start up the back. Can you see from there?
Question for Martin.
Yep.
Martin, I wondered what the recovery of your in situ recovery copper process is. I might have missed it.
Yeah, sure. So at present, the early test work that we've done, we've got the recovery up to 70% at present. From an economic modelling perspective, it actually stacks up with as low as 30%. So there's exponential IRR returns every 10% you move up the recovery path. I'll know more about that once we do the column testing, but at present it's around 70%. And we're also using a method that extracts the silver component of the deposit as well.
Brendan, can you just talk about the financial benefits that the government is offering to you to be there? Tax and R&D, that sort of thing, please.
Botswana specifically, not Spain, I take it? Yeah, look, I think the critical thing when I think about Botswana, there's, and perhaps I'll use that as a little bit of a segue for a bit of broader context. So firstly, when I think about the developing world, one of the things that I think sets Botswana apart is it's just over 2 million people. So it's quite a small population. Often when you look around the developed world, where you find real challenge is where you get the nexus, if you like, of very large populations and abject poverty, and it's very hard to break the cycle. I'm sure we can all think of countries in that situation. So it's a relatively small population. On its border, obviously, South Africa, well over 60 million people. So very different, very safe, rule of law, stable democracy. They're actually moving into their election cycle shortly. I think one of the critical aspects when we look right back at the lifeblood of Botswana is the diamonds industry. You would have all read a lot about BHP and Anglo in the last number of weeks, and clearly a lot of question was around the De Beers diamonds business, which of course has links to Botswana, which is the government linked entity there. And they have a very proud history in mining. So what's fascinating for me, you saw the pictures of the president when John and I sat along the side of the pit at Mateo for its opening on the T3 pit. It's the first time I've sat there with a president or a politician of any sort that was more focused on the configuration of the trucks and the shovels or the excavators and the productivity and utilisation we might be achieving, rather than he was just to take a photo, because they've grown up in the diamonds industry. So again, very deep history embedded within mining. When we then think about the fiscal regime, so you've got a royalty rate of around 3% for copper and around 5% for silver, so it's very competitive. They're very proud of that. You heard that they were in Perth earlier this year for Africa Down Under. Along with Cobre, we hosted them, and they're there obviously to promote the wares of the country, and they take the fiscal stability very seriously. And then you've got the usual type of, arrangements around capital. And if you like, the ability to offset capital with your investments. And then the overarching tax regime is probably marginally more attractive than Australia. So I think the critical thing when you put all of that together, ready-made workforce, we've very quickly ramped up to over 95% Botswanan. The combination of a government that is very, very supportive and sees the copper industry as a way of driving their people into the middle income curve. Ready-made infrastructure, as I said, high voltage power line, ready-made next to our mine site, along with those stable fiscal terms. And I just encourage you to go and have a look. And probably for everyone in the room, I just encourage you to get up to the Okavango Delta. So it's not only diamonds; they've got a thriving tourism industry. It is the premier game park in the world, so to speak. The water floods off the Angola watershed into the Okavango Delta and then disappears under the Kalahari Sands, and it is a wonderful place to go and view. Obviously the game of Central Africa. So I really encourage you to get up there. So tourism, copper, diamonds. And a big part is their cattle industry, and they're looking to generate synergies with Australia there as well.
Would you say it's the best jurisdiction you've worked in from a mining perspective? I mean, you're both very experienced mining executives with exposure to lots of jurisdictions around the globe. What would you? I mean, it's ranked top 10 in the Fraser Institute. Where would you rank it?
It was definitely number 1 in Africa.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they've got the 100th as well there, but...
Yeah, I think, look, I agree. I mean, it is one in Africa, and I think that's probably a big part of what we're trying to both do is just encourage people to take a look. and recognise that just putting the blanket over Africa and considering it as, if you like, a uniform jurisdiction to do business is possibly not the way to think about it. I know from prior roles I've been in that historically investment markets would put a zero on assets that sit within Africa, and I think what we've shown and the market's shown is a willingness to change that view over time. It's hard to say what's better or worse because I was talking to Jake earlier, Evolution, saying that the thing about mining is it's not a linear game. And I think it is a very good place to do business today. I think that is beholden on us continuing to do the right thing within the community. Citizen economic empowerment in Botswana is a major focus because, again, they want to drive people up the middle income curve. And unless we develop the supply chains that enable us to procure many of our goods in country, well, I'm sure the fiscal terms won't remain stable forever. So is it better or worse? I think Australia's been a very good place over time. I think most people in this room would agree that Australia's become a lot more difficult. And particularly, the point I was making earlier is that this very common thread of industry-wide cost inflation, I go around and talk to a lot of people, and I love to pose the question is, what do you think's driving industry-wide inflation? And it's labour. And then I often ask the question is, how similar do you think the Botswanan labour market is to the West Australian labour market? How similar do you think the southern Spanish labour market is to the West Australian labour market? And I can tell you, ironically, both of those economies have roughly 20% unemployment. So they're fundamentally different, so you just don't have the same levels of inflation.
Okay. We'll go over here and then we'll come back down. Yeah. If you want to ask a question, just let Linda know and she'll bring the microphone to you. But we've got two lined up and time for some more.
Brendan, it's Gary Cochrane. I just recently completed the AusIM tailings course. One thing I think that is not being recognised is the issue of tailings. Your biggest competitors are in Chile and Peru. High rainfall, seismic activity, steep valleys, and of course next door Brumadinho, Brazilian failure, which has had a major impact on supply out of Chile and Peru, and now sort of banned upstream construction of tailings dams. It appears to me that Australia and Africa, particularly with the area that you're in, has some substantial benefits for future supply compared to your competitors. You'd like to comment on that?
Look, I think it's a really interesting and excellent point. There are a lot of factors that go into this, of course, but I did talk about the billiard table flat landscape of our home in Botswana at Mateo. And all of you here who have been involved in construction and development of projects would know that simplicity really helps in our industry. As soon as you start having to build conveyors around mountains and you have additional complexity in your transfer points, you've got immediate risks with regards to utilisation and continuity. And so one of the great things about Mateo is, again, completely flat. We own the farm. We basically built the ROM stockyard, the coarse ore stockpile, the float circuit, concentrate shed in a straight line. And it's just very simple. And the ore, as I mentioned earlier, is very coarse. So it's chalcopyrite and bornite. It floats very well. So simplicity really matters. It also ties back to your point around tailings. We pride ourselves on building our tailings facilities to ICMM standards. Again, completely flat. We had no limitations in terms of where we wanted to put the first cell.
No seismic.
Currently building the second cell. You still do have some rainfall. There are periods of high rainfall, but again, given the topography and the landscape and the footprint that we had, no limitation in terms of design. So I think that's true. The only other point I would make, and obviously I've spent a lot of time with BHP and alike in that part of the world where you're talking, Latin America particularly. I'd also draw out that if you look at the copper cost curve, what I find fascinating is it's almost the inverse of the iron ore cost curve. So if you look at iron ore, the big major producers sit at the bottom of the cost curve. The thing about the copper industry is there's a plateau in the cost curve, which is the big Chilean porphyries. And the reality is that they're getting deeper. They no longer have access to water, the salars, so they have to pump up the hill. They also have obviously rising strip ratios. You put all of that together and costs are going up. And that is why I think if you've got an asset that can operate, as you mentioned earlier, well positioned on the cost curve with attractive levels of capital intensity and efficiency, there's a real opportunity to extract economic rent, I think, as we look forward, given the demand outlook for copper.
We don't have a supplementary motion to take notice of an answer. No. Next question. Yep, here we go.
Yeah,
Yep.
just going to the comment about from the Fraser Institute, and there's many factors there, of course, geopolitical, tenure, labour, all the factors you've covered. Now, if you were to compare that to, say, Western Australia or even Zambia, how does that sort of, in a general context, how does that fit?
Yeah, sure. So in regards to the Fraser Institute, from a mining-friendly, attractive, sort of perspective, there's a whole range of different countries in that list that move around on a yearly basis. I've noticed from the work that I completed over in Chile, and Brendan just touched on what's happening there. There's a lot of geopolitical issues happening there at present, and they've dropped significantly on that table over the last sort of 12 months. You've got South Africa on the other hand, that is bordering Botswana, which is 10th at present, and they're almost last. So I think it's a overall sort of table that is moves on an annual basis. So to keep rank for a long period of time is a very important sort of factor to take into account.
Maybe if I could expand, I'll take you to Spain just for something a little different and to compare and contrast. So there'll be people in the room who'll have later data on this than I do, but the things I hear anecdotally is that turnover through the last 12 to 24 months in Western Australia in the FIFO sites got up to 20 and 30%. And we've seen that, back through the 2000s as well. As someone put it to me, I think quite rightly, if you're in a fly-in, fly-out operation, when you get to the airport, it doesn't really matter what your destination is. That's where the big difference is for us in Spain. As I mentioned, the Spaniards have been extracting metal from these hills from before Roman times. You might be intrigued to know we actually have a Roman smelter on our site. Within 100 metres of our modern concentrator, we actually have an ancient Roman smelter. And really what that gives you a sense is it's part of the DNA, it's part of the culture. And for those of you who've been through that part of the world, it's much like the rest of Europe, rolling hills and these wonderful little villages, very densely populated, sort of 10,000 people, and they typically have a Moorish castle up on the hill. And the point being is the people there have sort of got it worked out. They don't want for much. As I like to say, you don't see Ferraris, Porsches driving around the streets. They're not going to the marina on the weekend. They do go to the beach a lot. They really value spending time with their families. And we're very lucky that they like to drive in and drive out to our operation, and hence you have very low turnover rates. Now, we run 8-hour shifts there and not 12, and I'm sure people gasp in this room, like, how can you do that in a modern mining industry? Well, if we try to transplant Australian culture and Australian way of working into Spain, it just won't work because it'll change the way of life. But the key point being is low turnover brings low cost of turnover. The cost of an underground worker in Spain is not far off 50% of what it is in Western Australia. So we may not get the same levels of productivity, but on a dollar costed base, it's pretty good.
Will?
So you two are obviously both in Botswana, both mates, both working together, both in the Kalahari copper belt, but there's one core difference that I see. One of you is doing a conventional copper mining approach with a ball mill and flotation, and the other's exploring ISR. Why is that? Do you ever have a debate about it?
We can
I think
try
it looks
one
like
now
they
if
do.
that's what you're after.
Please, I would like
It's a long flight to Botswana.
Yeah, well,
1A and 1B.
I'll answer that. I think optimally, if you did have a standard open pit, then the market itself is more conventional, and simplicity, as what Brendan said, that's obviously the traditional way of mining copper in that area. But I guess the trick is you have to find that as well. So what Cobre found was quite a large sort of deposit that was very unique in nature itself, which was too low grade to do a conventional underground method, and too deep to do an open pit. So then you start like analysing like how can you get this 100+ million tonnes of copper out of the ground. So at that point, that led us towards this ISCR method. And then, as I said in my presentation, we did a lot of desktop analysis to start off with to see if this was viable. And then, so far so good to date. So, the production, our pumping tests we're doing is working, the injection wells are working, and this is quite a modular sort of process that we can follow. And at the moment, there's no red flags, and our engineers are saying there's no fatal flaws. So it could actually be the holy grail of mining if you can produce through an ISCR method at a very low OPEX and CAPEX and produce a cathode on site. I consider it the holy grail, but it's a very unique sort of situation that you have to be able to do this. And I think in regards to that, we are also trying to find the traditional styles as well in our Kit West and Okavango project areas, which is more vein-hosted sort of deposits.
I think we have time for a couple more questions. Do we have? We'll do 3 more. Here, and the gentleman over here.
Martin, further to your comment, what did BHP think about your approach to the in situ possible production?
Yeah, so I can't say too much about that due to confidentialities that we have.
We won't tell anybody.
Yeah.
We read the disclaimer.
Though what I can say is that they've sort of guided us to set up a subsidiary, a company called Cobre Innovation, with a likelihood of possible grants into that subsidiary to work with us on a more of an innovation IP method to get intel on this process. And it's a process that Cobre could possibly patent as well. So what I can say is they left the site very interested about what we're doing on an ISCR point of view.
Maybe if I can, just before you move on, I think it is worth noting in Botswana that we're dealing with something that most people in this room just are not familiar with. We're talking about a sedimentary copper basin. And it's quite remarkable because, again, my background, and most of you, I'm sure, is looking for discrete ore bodies that are often, hosted in some sort of porphyry or intrusive or IOCG. You drill them and you define them, if you like, and then go about mining them, often over decades. The entirety of the Botswanan sedimentary copper basin is mineralised with copper. And that's why, for us, the exciting thing is it's open country, but we're also learning very much as we mine the structural controls. And you talked about seismic and passive seismic. I think that's the next big piece in the puzzle to help understand that. We can see the similarities with Zone 5, with Kwamakau up in the north, with T3, A4 and A1. But the critical thing here is we're not trying to find copper. There is literally copper across the whole of the basin. It goes back to the marine environment and the sedimentary deposition that occurred obviously back in the day. We're actually just trying to understand the controls that are driving obviously fluid movements, changes in pressure and temperature, and how we get precipitation of economic resources. There's huge potential, and as I said, I think we're only just starting with that process. The ore bodies aren't as rich as the sedimentary basins in some other parts of Africa, but again, if you find the right depth and the right I guess levels of concentration, and you've got the ready-made workforce and infrastructure, the world's your oyster.
Okay, we'll do 2 more questions. We'll do here, and then we'll finish over here.
Brendan Martin, Malcolm Hancock, BDA. Really interested to hear your talk about Botswana. We spent some time with Panost looking at Kwamakau in the past, and thoroughly recommended that they went ahead with that. Sadly, the Chinese masters decided differently, but absolutely endorse your comments in terms of Botswana being a great place to work and develop. I've got a Zambian copper belt background as well, so again endorse the comments about the stratiform copper belt continuation, not as high grade as Zambia and Zaire, but nevertheless a definitely undeveloped area. So a great place to be. And and the Okavango Delta just makes it even better. So absolutely endorse that. My question really was just if you, interesting looking at the two projects, you know, one to the northeast there with looking at chalcocite mineralisation and in situ leach, and then further south the bornite chalcopyrite mineralisation and Comicar between. My understanding is that has now gone ahead as an underground operation, and again an interesting contrast, you know, looking at your open pit operations. Can you just give us a bigger picture about that whole area in terms of the potential both for in situ leach, open pit and underground, and do you see your projects also having, you know, further ongoing potential for underground development or further open pit development?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that question. I think the area itself is extremely vast. So it's a vast package that we own, and also Sandfire being the largest landholder of the belt. There is so many different styles of mineralisation that's going to happen and occur throughout this area. Like you're talking in excess of 30,000 square kilometres of land that's sort of combined in this main sort of structural corridor and along the basin margins of the area. The thing that sort of excites me the most is that these basin margins haven't been tested yet. So we're getting into a point now that we can actually start target drilling these basin margin deposits. And if they come in, the way that they're sort of explaining it to me is that there's a deposit called Banana Zone. So it's like a folded trap site with the roof taken off. What we're actually looking for on the basin margins is almost like a banana zone, but it's like kept intact. So you've got this fold trap site that the whole thing is like kept intact. And if that can happen on the depth of these basin margins, then you can find something that could potentially be T1. So these are sort of the, you know, Tier 1 underground sort of potentials that I believe that could be found on the basin margins. And then you get to like the other area that we've got being in Ngami, which is just like a blanket pretty much of chalcocite dominated mineralisation. And as what Brendan said just before, like the whole belt itself is like, it's not about finding the cover, it's about finding the concentrated cover. And the majority of the belt would have background of 0.1% sort of copper throughout the whole anticline and contact of the belt itself. I think the interesting sort of part of this 40 kilometres that we had, like the lowest sort of grade we're getting was 0.3. So in every hole we're drilling was sort of 0.5% copper and then going up to 3%. So even the low grade background was a lot higher than the general sort of like blanket mineralisation throughout the whole belt. And then you're going to move up, if you move across to sort of like the Kid East area on the other side, that's going to be more like, you know, like T3 analogue, so you're looking for open pit sort of, you know, analysis there. But again, very tricky exploration, a lot of work that has to be done. Like it's not easy to hit these things that Sandfire have hit over the years. But there is a huge amount of potential for open pit and underground, and also in situ copper recovery as a sort of a trifecta on this belt.
Okay, last question.
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to ask a question about in general about the copper as a mineral, and I asked some geologists. They say, you know, compare 20 years ago, like, you know, the grade of copper ore and also the quality. It's a significant decline, which means you have very low grade compared 20 years ago, and also the copper, the ore itself is a lot harder, and the size of the ore is a lot bigger, so it costs a lot more money to process it. So the reason I asked that question, you look at the last 20 years, copper already went up 500 times. And 500% tons, sorry. So if the copper went up, if they go to double digit and very quickly, and then we'll have a problem to really to supply for renewable, because then all those renewable projects and manufacturing going to be cannot be affordable for a lot of people. Thank you very much.
Yeah, look, I'm happy to take that. I think where you ended is a philosophy, so to speak, that demand will probably end up rationing supply, or the other way around. And I think that's probably right. So, look, when I think about it, very simply, and I mentioned Latin America before, all the challenges. The world moved to Latin America, rightly so, because of the size of the ore bodies, the scale that could be, deployed, and the fact that they really are very large bulk mining operations with concentrators thrown on the back, which the big miners are just very, very good at with their experience in iron ore and coal, etc. But the reality is they're getting deeper. As I said, strip ratios are rising. They have no access to water. They're building desalination. And by definition, therefore, either production is going to decline or they're going to have to invest enormous amounts of capital to stand still as they move from the supergene into the hypergene.
And grade depleting.
Yeah, and so then what really brings it all home to me, how I've thought about it simplistically for years, is in a market that's now more north of 20 million tonnes, but let's keep the math really easy. If you say 20 million tonne market, even if demand's only growing at 2.5%, but grade's declining at 2.5%, you've got apparent demand of 5. So you've immediately got 1 million tonnes of new supply that's needed every year, which is effectively Escondida. And that's the challenge. That's the issue in the copper market. And I think given the structural thematic that's underway, and I think most people in this room would agree that the world needs to decarbonise, and to do that it needs to electrify. When you look at that demand thematic, it's highly likely that 2.5% may be a conservative number. And that is really the dynamic that we're looking at, and I think that is why, if I look over the last 20 years, and I've spent too much time thinking about these commodity markets, but we've seen scarcity pricing for pretty much every commodity that I can think of over that time. I don't think we've yet truly seen it for copper. But if we look at the fundamentals for copper over the next 1, 3, 5 and 10 years, it probably has as compelling a fundamentals as we've seen for a commodity. So one of the things we know with the investment community, for instance, is it really struggles to value scarcity pricing. In other words, it never does. But that is actually when you generate the rent in the industry. So I'll leave you with that thought for the day.
Okay, thank you very much, Brendan and Martin. Before we let you leave the stage, we do have a little tradition here at the Sydney Mining Club. It's a tradition that was started by our founder, Julian Malnick. It's become a tradition to present our guests with a special gift, and that gift today is the flag of the Southern Cross. Gets a bad rap sometimes, but it was first flown on 29th of November 1954 at Bakery Hill near Ballarat, where some 10,000 miners had gathered from right around the world, from right around the country, in protest against government taxation and the manner in which government regulation and taxation was being enforced. They swore allegiance to this flag, which flew over the Eureka Stockade just a few days later, and many gave their lives in the morning mist during that fatal battle that occurred on December the 1st. So this flag has been a symbol that has been appropriated from time to time over the years, but it is ultimately, in its original form, a symbol of solidarity against perceived government oppression, and it was flown on that night, flown on that morning, and we present it to you as in its truest possible sense. We also present it to you at a time when, just on reflection, the Queensland Government is about to legislate the world's highest coal royalty regime. The New South Wales Government is about to introduce and implement a 30% increase in coal royalties from the 1st of July this year, and recent Commonwealth Treasury data has indicated that this sector, the mining sector, the resources sector, has contributed a total of 40% of all company taxes in this country in the last recorded year. So just think about that. This country is reliant by 40% on all the company taxes that are paid. The government that wants to destroy this industry is cashed up because of it. So that I guess I'm getting worked up in the spirit of the Eureka moment.
Thank you very much.
Put down your muskets. Yeah. Put down your muskets. But we can present you with this flag. I know Julian will be thrilled that we've done so, and we ask you to accept this gift in the manner in which it is intended. Will you please join me in welcoming our guests? Ladies and gentlemen, I know we're running just a bit behind time, so I won't keep you very much longer. Just a special plug for our next few Sydney Mining Club events. Our next Leading Edge event is on Thursday the 4th of July, and again, these events are proving to be very popular as well, so get in early if you'd like to attend. The next Leading Edge event is a New Zealand special. New Zealand, I hear you say. We have Mr. Richard Takon, the Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer of Bathurst Resources, New Zealand's largest specialised coal company. Mr. Damien Spring, the CEO of Santana Minerals, developing the Bendigo Ophir Gold Project, and New Zealand Minister Shane Jones, the New Zealand First Cabinet Minister for Regional Development, one of the ministers responsible for the fast-track approvals bill to turbocharge mining and regional development in New Zealand. If you want to see a passionate speech in Parliament, yes, there are a few from time to time, Google Shane Jones' fast-track bill and watch his speech on YouTube to the New Zealand Parliament in March this year about this bill and what it is intended to do. If only we had politicians prepared to say the same thing here in Australia. So that will be a very special lineup. Get in early, these tickets go fast, and this one is going to be a real special. Our next lunchtime event on Thursday the 1st of August, we have Rowena Smith, the Managing Director and CEO of Australian Strategic Metals. ASM, as many of you know, are an emerging vertically integrated producer of critical metals based around their Dubbo project, which is a long-term, globally significant resource of rare earths, zirconium, niobium and hafnium located in central western New South Wales. So 2 great events coming up. Thanks again to our speakers, thanks again to our sponsors, and thanks to you one and all for coming along today, and we look forward to seeing you at our events in the future. Thank you.